Welcome to Mr. Beck Does Your Homework. This is homework for AP Physics, homework 2.1, question number 5. It says, when the shuttle bus comes to a sudden stop to avoid hitting a dog, it decelerates uniformly at 5.4 meters per second squared as it slows from 8.4 meters per second to 0 meters per second. Find the time interval of acceleration for the bus. Answer in units of seconds. Well, that's a little confusing. Let's see what's happening. I've got a bus that's zipping along at some initial speed, v. Later on, it's trying to avoid hitting the dog, so later on, that same bus is going to have a new velocity, v. So this one is my initial velocity. Let me make it v0. And this is my later velocity, v. And it does that deceleration over some period of time to get from point A to point B. So let's see. I know that it decelerates uniformly at 5.4 meters per second squared. So that's telling me actually my acceleration. And if it's decelerating, that's another way of saying negative acceleration. So its acceleration is negative 5.4 meters per second squared. It slows from 8.4 meters per second. That's my initial velocity is 8.4 meters per second. And it slows to 0 meters per second. So my final velocity is going to be 0 meters per second. Find the time interval of acceleration. So I'm looking for a time equals question mark. Do I have a relationship for acceleration, initial velocity, final velocity, and time? Absolutely. I know that my acceleration is going to be my final velocity minus my initial velocity. So that's my change in velocity divided by time. If I multiply both sides by time, so that's time over here and time over here, then time goes away. And then I would get, so that's acceleration times time equals v minus v0. Then to get time all by itself, I'm going to divide by acceleration, and then acceleration cancels out here, and I'm left with time equals final velocity minus initial velocity divided by acceleration. So now I can solve for time. So I get my time equals my final velocity, 8.4. Sorry. My final velocity, scratch that out. My final velocity is 0. So that's 0 minus 8.4 divided by, and this is meters per second, divided by my acceleration of negative 5.4 meters per second squared. This will be a negative number, this will be a negative number, so negative 8.4 divided by negative 5.4 is going to give me some positive number for time. Now what about my units? I've got meters per second divided by meters per second squared. So I've got meters per second over meters per second squared. You should remember that when you're dividing by a fraction, it's the same thing as multiplying by the inverse of the fraction. So this is the same thing as meters divided by seconds times seconds squared over meters. Because if I flip this, that's what it becomes here. So you can multiply by the inverse. Now you'll see that meters cancels out, and seconds squared, this is going to cancel out one of that. So my units turn out being just seconds, as we would expect. So that's going to be a positive answer with a number of seconds.